Hi everybody, I am Jacqueline Hollows and I live in the UK if you can't tell. I am the founder and CEO of an organisation called Beyond Recovery, which is a non-profit organisation which I set up 6 years ago to take the understanding of the three principles into prisons predominantly. So I work mainly with people in custody, although now I do work also supporting the people who have left custody, and started working with prison staff as well. I'm known to some people because I speak at events around the world, mainly to share the amazing stories that happen when we take this understanding into that population. And in fact, if we get time today, I've been in there today because I'm allowed in once a week to work with the vulnerable people. I've done 21 one-to-ones. It's called Speed Wisdom, I think. And I've got a letter, so if we get time today, I'll share that with you. Mm-hmm. I'm very, very happy to be here and to see you all.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm so delighted to actually get to teach with you, Jacqueline. I've been wanting to do that for years. I've come to your prison and spoken and been in conferences with you, but we've never really shared the giving a talk together. So I'm delighted to be doing that. My name is Joe Bailey, and for those of you who don't know me, and I've been involved in the three principles for about 40 years now, and was mentored by Sydney Banks and met him back in 1980. But I guess probably my main credential for giving this webinar today is that I often call myself a recovering fearaholic, because I think I came out of the womb, like you said, Jacqueline, you were ready. I think I was afraid coming out of the womb. Ever since I was a little kid, I was just very shy, and you wouldn't know that by the way I am now, but as a kid, I was very shy, afraid to go to school, and fear was my constant companion. I'd wake up every morning with a feeling of anxiety and fear, and I think probably because of that, it made me extremely curious about how the mind worked, because I wanted desperately to overcome that insecurity, that fear, that feeling of dread. So that led to becoming a clinical psychologist and eventually to the three principles, and which is what really, I would have to say, my recovery from my fearaholism began shortly after I learned about the three principles. I was extremely stressed as a professional. I was burned out, and I thought my stress was all coming from out there, from the outside world, from my extremely busy caseload of clients and difficult people to work with, just the stress of my profession, being a young dad, living in modern day society. I thought it was all coming from out there. And what I learned, and what Jacqueline and I really want to share with you today, is an understanding of what creates fear. Because once we get an understanding of the nature of fear itself and its purpose, because it's not a bad thing. Fear has its purpose. But when we misuse our mind, when we misuse the power that we have with our mind and our imagination, we can create fear about things that don't exist. There's an acronym for fear: false evidence appearing real. And so that's most of what my fear in my life was always about. It was about things that I imagined would happen that never did happen. And I thought somehow magically it was protecting me. If I worried enough, I would keep it away. And I think that's rampant right now. So in this current pandemic of the coronavirus that we're all very conscious of and aware of through the media, there's been a concurrent pandemic, and that's the pandemic of fear surrounding this, and understandably so. we're living in very uncharted waters here. Um, all the experts are giving us their best guess of what's about to come next or what we need to do to prepare. But we're all kind of in the same boat. We're all really in the unknown. So Jacqueline and I today, we really want to help give you the understanding that has helped us, certainly helped me to probably not eliminate fear from my life, because I've felt fear during this pandemic as well. I still have nights where I wake up in the middle of the night having thoughts about it, or wake up in the morning with that feeling of dread or the unknown. But because of the understanding that we have, that we share with people in many different venues, um, and with different populations, because of that understanding, it helps strengthen our psychological immune system. And when our psychological immune system is strong, it's resilient, we're able to experience any kind of negativity, including fear, but not let it mushroom out of control into an anxiety attack or into something that rules our life. It's just for me, fear is an alarm clock that on a deeper level, it wakes us up to our true essence or our true nature. So in a sense, it's a friendly little gift, if you will, that reminds us that we may be overusing our thinking, that we may be awfulizing about what is to come. And so that feeling of anxiety or fear is something that we can, like this morning when I woke up, I had a lot of energy. I'm very excited about doing this webinar with all of you. And earlier in my life, I would have interpreted that energy as anxiety. But now I see it as this, it's just this incredible force of energy, much like an athlete before they're going out to do a race or before a ball game. They get a lot of adrenaline going. And for me, that's just this inspiration starting to flow. And so for me, that was a welcome feeling. It was like, oh, wow, this is going to be really good. I can't wait. Instead of, oh, no, I hope I'm not afraid. I'll forget what I'm going to say. And not, so how we relate to that feeling, that sensation, is what we want to talk about. So I'm thrilled to be here. And we're going to have an interactive conversation. Jacqueline and I are going to both kind of talk for a little bit about our perspective on this and be as helpful as we can, and then we'll open it up to the group. So Jacqueline, you want to say some more?
Yeah, me too. I had a lifetime of really feeling as though I was an imposter. There's some sort of thing, isn't there, like a made up thing about imposter syndrome, and that was me. Like I thought I was really insecure, but I put on a really good show about not doing that, not showing that, and so I wouldn't spend a lot of time. I didn't feel a lot of anxiety, but I felt a lot of insecurity, and I spent a lot of time covering that up or hiding that or hiding from that. Again, thinking it was coming from elsewhere, like coming from having to stand up in front of a team or not being good enough at something, so I had to be better at it or whatever. So lots of things that I thought were making that happen, and then to realize that it was my relationship with it is so freeing. It's so freeing, and it doesn't mean that I don't have fearful moments or insecure moments or angry moments, but I have a different relationship with that feeling now. I know where it's coming from, even though I'm feeling it in the moment. I pretty much most of the time know that there's nothing to do about it because I understand it. But I didn't know that for most of my life. So I'm still humbled by what this understanding can do. and at some point as well, I can share with you that it doesn't it it doesn't stop you from having an experience. So I've had a depression experience. In fact, less than a year ago, a very deep depression experience, a mental breakdown, in fact, and it doesn't stop that. But I wasn't frightened of that when that happened. I've had depression in the past. When it happened again to me, and it was so severe after not happening for many, many years, and it was so severe 12 months ago that, I had something to hold on to, which was that I knew that I'd be okay, or that I'd know what to do next. And so I didn't spend time running around trying to fix it, trying to change it, trying to not be in it. I was in it, and I can tell you now, it was horrible, but I didn't make it worse by adding to it, because my relationship with what was going on was different. I accepted it in a way. I surrendered to the feeling of it, buckled in, strapped myself in for the ride, and trusted that I would come up with something, would know, what I needed to do, and I didn't have to scramble around trying to change it. I didn't like it, and I thought it might last forever. My head was empty, and I thought I'm never going to be able to think again. But even though I had those thoughts, the element of the fear had gone, if you like. That the fear was gone, because it just felt like you just need to strap in right now and ride it out. And that's what I did, and I overcame. It was a mental breakdown, and I overcame it in 2 weeks. Literally 2 weeks I popped, and I wouldn't say that I got better overnight, but I started to come back to myself. I don't think that is possible with that when you're trying to fix it with outside things. So that was just an example. I don't know if I didn't want to go on too long.
I really love what you just said, Jacqueline, and the point that you're making with that is how you relate to your fear, or whatever emotional upset you might be having. But we're talking about fear today. When you are just not afraid of it, not afraid of your fear, something shifts. Something happens when you, I love one of my favorite quotes of Sydney Banks, and I can't remember, I think it's in The Missing Link. He says, if human beings simply discovered to not be afraid of the experiences that they're having, to not be afraid of their own experience, that alone would change the world. And for me, what you just said, Jacqueline, is just really putting a box around that, the way that you related to your breakdown, to your depression, by not fearing it, your natural resiliency, the natural capacity for self-healing and self-correction was triggered. And that's something that, for me, is, if there's one major takeaway from today's webinar that I'd like all of you to get, is that fear is a way, in a sense, a quickening mechanism. It's like a warning light on the dashboard that goes off that lets you know you're about out of gas, or that you're over the speed limit, or that your engine's overheating. Fear is letting you know in that moment to stop, step back, reflect. And if there is something that you need to take action at that moment, then your wisdom, your built-in resilience of insight and wisdom, will give you the information you need to survive, to be safe, to go get tested, whatever, see the doctor, Um, and so this relationship to our psychological experience, when it's thrown out of balance, when we don't fear it, when we don't try to do anything with it, we let it kind of run its course, it self-corrects. And what replaces it is this innate mental health, this innate resilience. And it's really a connection to the spiritual true essence of our being, who we actually are underneath all of our habitual conditioned thoughts, our ego. Underneath that is this wise, resilient being that um, lands on their feet again, can get back on their feet. So this understanding of how to relate to our fear gives us the psychological immunity to be able to be responsive to, because when we're caught up in fear, we become very self-centered. We become immobilized by our fear. We make really bad decisions. We don't think of anybody but ourselves. And so it's very it adds a lot of insult to the injury of the pandemic. When fear gets added to the equation, people don't make good decisions. People don't see how to be of help. Instead, they just are trying to survive for themselves. So um, as we learn to get our psychological bearings in this era of this pandemic of fear, in this pandemic of COVID-19, we're more able to, and in a way, this is kind of a perfect lesson here for all of us to be collectively learning, is to trust deeper in this essential self that we are. That's the seat of wisdom, security, compassion, understanding, um, good thinking, healthy thinking. And I'd just like to give you a really practical example. Um, and some of you may have heard this story before, but there's a woman, a friend of mine named Mahima, who was in charge of emergency preparedness in Nepal. And so as a result of her role, she realized that a lot of first responders, people on the front lines during a disaster, a fire, an earthquake, a pandemic, will go into a state of panic, and they don't last as long, they burn out quicker, and they also don't follow protocol. They don't think very clearly because their fear blocks their natural ability and their training. And so she searched on the internet for ways to help those who she trained, and she came across the three principles, psychology, and Latin, among all kinds of things on mindfulness, and you name it. She scoured the internet looking for an answer or a solution. And something that she heard on one of the videos was a statement that one of the teachers said, that we're always living in the feeling of our own thinking. We're always living in the feeling of our thinking. And when she first heard that, what the heck does that mean? It didn't register, but it kept running around in the back of her mind. And then the earthquake in Kathmandu in Nepal hit. This was like 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now. And it was devastating. Thousands of people were killed, or a lot of people buried alive. There was all kinds of disease broke out. They couldn't get medical supplies. There were fires, you name it. It was a total disaster. And she was in charge. And like everybody else, she had to get to safety. So she went to her grandfather's house, and she huddled with her siblings and her nieces and nephews. And they're all, because it was the safest structure. It was built very well. And she was huddled in there, and all the adults were fretting, and, oh, when's the next, aftershock? Will it be the big one? And they were just terrified. Understandably so, by the way, understandably so. And her little niece was running around in the room, and every time the shaking would stop, she would start playing with her dolls or running around and make playing make-believe or something. And at one point, the little girl looks up at all the adults and says, "Can't you see? It's over." And when the little girl said that, Mahima said that sentence came back in her mind. I'm living in the feeling of my thinking 100% of the time. And she said, I realized that it wasn't the earthquake that was creating my fear. It was my thoughts about the earthquake that was creating my fear. And in that moment, she said, my fear subsided. I got very calm. And in that moment of calm, I saw exactly what to do. My thinking cleared up, and I started giving orders to everyone in my family about what they should do. But I was like the person in the room with the calmest mind that could see practically what to do. And in that moment, she realized if everybody in Nepal knew this, we would be able to respond to this in a much better way. So she got on the phone and called Rudy Kennard, who was a person who was on one of the webinars that she listened to. And he happened to be at the international conference in London. Jacqueline, you were probably there. And he got up on, and she said, Rudy, is there any way you can come to Nepal and bring a team? We need to be trained. Everybody needs to be trained in principles so that we can see how to be resilient as we face this incredible disaster and crisis that we're in. And so he stood up on a chair and he says, I'm going to start a GoFund to send 6 of us over to Nepal to do training. And he immediately raised the money. And they spent the next 6 weeks in Nepal, and people also sent videos because most of the relief workers were out in the field, and they'd watch the videos of the conference or of the principals on their cell phones. And as a result, their burnout diminished dramatically. They were able to stay out in the field twice as long. They recuperated much more quickly to get back in to fight the battle, to unbury people and do what they needed to do. So fearlessness, not being trapped by fear, is super practical, not only for first responders, but for those of us on the sidelines watching CNN or whatever TV station you're watching as we're in isolation here. The more that we settle into our own truer self, our true essence, the more we see how to be helpful. The more we see how to make the best of the situation, not just cleaning all your closets, or stocking the cupboards, but seeing ways to reach out to your relatives, to friends, to other people, to be creatively part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And there's hundreds of examples, and Jacqueline, I'm sure you have lots of examples in the UK of this too, where we hear wonderful stories every day about people who've really risen to the occasion here and have created ways of helping people who are really in a lot of distress. So I'm going to toss the ball over to you, Jacqueline.
I love that, Joe. What I really heard there differently and deeper than I've really recognized before was that the auto-correction, it really felt like the nub of what you were saying there is that when that fear triggers or any of those things trigger something, it triggers the auto-correction, the self-healing or the creativity or the whatever needs to happen next. And I saw that really differently when you were talking, because it took it took the onus off me, right? Because it was like, oh, I don't have to deal with this. I don't have to understand how my mind's working, or even I don't have to really do any of that. I just, simply having a direction of this and knowing that there's an auto-correction has enabled me to allow that trigger to happen without me trying to get in there and adjust it. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot. You know, of course, we're seeing a lot of pain and suffering and fear as well, but we're seeing a lot of that. People's automatic systems are being triggered. Raised compassion, kinder, thinking about neighbours, creating things, doing things for other people. That's part of the auto system, right? And it really resonated when you talked there. It was really nice to think that, to know that's what's happening.
I loved last night watching TV, and they showed in New York City, where the pandemic in the United States is hit hardest at this point. And every time there's a shift change going into the hospitals, everybody on the apartments all around each hospital in the city will come out on their balconies and they'll just applaud or sing a song to the nurses and the doctors on their shift change. And it just basically giving them encouragement and gratitude, and it really boosts the morale, because they're dragging their butt, believe me, after a shift of dealing with so many people dying. And another example I heard the other day, this was just kind of a little simple one, but this woman called in on a call-in show, how are people responding to this pandemic? And she said, well, I was sitting at home and I was feeling really depressed and just feeling sorry for myself. God, I can't go to work. I can't see my friends. My boyfriend can't come over because he might have been exposed and da-da-da. And I was just in a pity party. And she said, all I could think about is poor me, poor me. She said, after a couple of hours of that, I just got so sick of it. I just said, I can't do this anymore. This is awful. And she said, at that moment, out of despair, really, and kind of saying uncle, or giving up, surrendering, she said, this thought just popped into my head out of nowhere. I don't even know my neighbors. I've lived on this street for 5 years. I know none of my neighbors. I can't believe it. I could set up a Facebook chat room for our block. And so she got busy on the computer and she set up the chat room. And then she drew up these little 3x5 cards with the link to the chat room. And then at the bottom, because not everybody has computers, she said, let's start a ritual on our block. Every day at 6 o'clock, come out of your house, stand on the end of your sidewalk, and let's just wave at each other from a safe distance. She said, that was really nice for my neighbors, but what was really nice is my depression went away. My self-absorption disappeared. My mood lifted, because this reboot that Jacqueline was just talking about, this default setting of resilience, when you're in a crisis, it kicks in compassion, creative thinking, a lack of self-centeredness, a more of otherness, and it's resiliency in the face of suffering. And that resiliency is like a huge immune booster. If we could measure what happens to your internal immune system when you're in a feeling of compassion and love and creativity, it'd be very different than when you're bound up in fear. What fear does is it depletes the immune system, all of the biological chemicals that you need to ward off the virus or the flu or other things. So we heal faster, we experience less pain, and we come up with creative solutions. So what Jacqueline and I are talking about today is not only really good for you, and that's good that it's good for you, because you gotta catch the ball before you run with it. You've got to heal yourself before you can help anyone else. But it will not only help you, but it'll help all the people that you touch in your life. Because when, there's a lot of people pretty gloomy, but there's also some really good humor. I got a great little meme that came across my phone last night from my daughter-in-law's mom. And I had my wife and I in hysterics. It was so funny. It was all about this dog, and the dog is talking on the meme, and it's like, God, I can't believe they're still here. I can't even get any sleep. I'm just so sick and tired of this people. Why aren't they back at work? I'm tired of this social isolation thing. And it's just going on. I just want to sit home. And I won't say what he said, the rest of it, but it was not a clean statement. But it was so funny. And so these are the kinds of things that come out when we've rebooted to that resilience instead of, and I'm not saying that you should judge your fear, and Jacqueline wouldn't say that either, I'm sure. If you judge your fear, it actually accelerates. Or if you try to push the fear away from you, it accelerates. Denial does not work. It's embracing where you are, accepting where you are, that automatically, it's the auto reboot. I love that term that you used.
Yeah. How's everybody doing? This landing with everyone? Yeah.
This isn't our first rodeo with fear, is it?
No.
Humanity has been experiencing plagues and wars and earthquakes and disasters all throughout time. And but we really have something, not that we have any ownership of it, because this resiliency is just part of being a human being. It's built into us. But having an understanding of how the mind works and how we relate, that we are not our thinking. We're the thinker of the thoughts, but we are not the thoughts that come into our head. You can't control the thoughts that come into your head. I still feel terror sometimes in the last couple of weeks. I still feel fear. I still feel fidgety. I still feel all the range of emotions, but I know this too shall pass. And if I don't do anything about it, it passes more quickly than if I try to do something about it. It seems so counterintuitive to the self-help movement. Or so in the self-help movement, we're always trying to do a technique, a meditation, a yoga or something to try to get over a feeling. And what we're saying is really the opposite is, and not that you shouldn't do yoga or go for a run or any of those things, I'm not saying that, but you're to trust really that you've got something built into you that already knows way more than you know intellectually about rebounding and healing yourself and becoming resilient again.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because what's occurring to me right now is the gift of it. Because the gift of fear, like the gift of the breakdown for me, is it's a gift because it if you get to that point where you're overwhelmed with anxiety or fear or anything really, it's just mind saying enough already. You're not taking any notice of wisdom, and so I'm going to close you down for a minute. So you get into this very fearful place, or this stuck place, or this anxious place, and the gift of that is that it really triggers that self-help, that self-healing, auto-correction, that reboot. It's a bit like you hear about teachers and nurses, I guess, when they go on holiday. Teachers go on holiday and they get ill because they've been fighting off illness while they've been teaching, and cracking on and working through it and not listening to that resilience and that wisdom that's saying, slow down a little, or take care of yourself a bit more, or listen to your body, or whatever. And they stop and they get ill. But I think that they get ill because their mind suddenly goes, right, great, we can shut you down for a minute so that you can listen.
Yeah.
Right, because then in that shut down place, actually there's the, you don't really want to do anything else. You get a chance to listen then to that inner resilience, and that voice that can help you thrive.
I'm wondering, Jacqueline, if anybody has any comments or questions, or any examples of things that have come to you out of your resilience or your creativity that have helped lift you up or get you out of your fear, or some of you who might be frozen in fear or really panicking and want have a question. So we're all in the same boat, we're all in this together, and that's to me one of the biggest, most dramatic um, side effects of this pandemic is the realization that as one planet, this knows no borders, or the virus doesn't get a passport. It affects everyone equally. It's an equal opportunity employer. It'll move in anywhere, whether you're Boris Johnson and the Prime Minister of the UK, or you're just an ordinary Joe, or you're a nurse, or whoever you are. That there's so many Tom Hanks and his wife, and so many people that some of our colleagues or dear friends in the Three Principles community have gotten the coronavirus. So it's an opportunity. So I'd love to hear what
We have Marie.
Yeah,
oh, Marie.
I have a more dramatic question actually, because I think many of us will get the virus and will be quite okay with it. But I wonder if you have any advice for the people. Perhaps one of us or two of us may end up in ICU, where you get intubated, you can't communicate, you don't have your loved ones beside you, people are frantic running around, and you have difficulties breathing. Do you have any advice if any of us should end up in that kind of situation?
Well, I don't know. I can take a crack at that, or you can, Jacqueline.
You can go first.
I think inevitably, we're all, life is a terminal disease, as they say. We're all going to die eventually. It's usually out of our conscious awareness. Being in an ICU bed and an incubator is a more drastic realization that I could die. And fear of death is kind of the ultimate fear for most human beings. I've talked with many people who have faced death, who have been at that state of being terminal, whether it was in an intensive care unit or in a car wreck where they're trapped. And I've heard so many stories of people saying that's when their spiritual realization occurred, or they went into a feeling of extreme surrender and deep peace at the darkest hour. So I'm not saying how I know how that happens. I don't know how that happens, but I know that it's always possible that peace of mind has nothing to do with circumstance. Because there are people in idyllic, perfect health, wealthy, sitting on a beach in Hawaii, sipping a Mai Tai or whatever, that are absolutely miserable. And other people who I've known holding their loved one in their arms or their child in their arms as they die, that have experienced the deepest peace they've ever experienced, or the deepest sense of connection and love. So I guess I would say that peace of mind acceptance and embrace of whatever is means that it's possible at any time, under any circumstances, that you can experience this. Now, like Jacqueline so beautifully said, it's really in the acceptance and the not trying to change the experience that we're more likely to fall into that. We kind of get out of our own way when we quit fighting it. The harder we try to make it happen, the harder we try to find by positive thinking or talking ourselves out of our fears or whatever, it seems to have the opposite effect. But when we can accept the fact that we're living in the feeling of our thinking, number one, and that we can't control the thoughts that come in our mind, number two, and the third is that this too shall pass. That's the nature of thought, is it's transient. It's a river of thought that's always moving. And the only way we can stop it is if we dam up the river through non-acceptance, judgment, anger. There's a lot of ways that we can block it up. But when we accept it, it moves on more quickly. It's just like when Maria, it's good to see you, by the way. Thank you for your question. You were in my class on the healing power of the mind. And when I had Lyme disease, chronic neurological Lyme disease, and I was in really in the lowest point. I had extreme pain. I couldn't think. I was like I had Alzheimer's. And I remember kind of at the darkest night of my life, I was alone at my cabin and in extreme pain. And I just kind of wanted to get out of my body. I couldn't stand the pain anymore. And I just screamed out, help, There's no one there except my cat that got on my chest and started purring, which was helpful. And I just heard this voice in my head that said, embrace me, embrace me, embrace me, embrace the pain. What? Is there anybody else around? Any other answers? Can I get another lifeline? And then I stuck. I had no choice. So I thought, okay, and I just accepted the pain in my back. It felt like a knife through it, and it went away. It was like a miracle. It just transformed it. So I don't know. That's not a prescription. I don't know how you do that. I know that's what came to me in that moment of despair. And I know that it took my pain away for that period of time. It came back, but I had relief. So there's something built into us, this default setting, this, you could call it a spiritual divine connection. You could call it inner wisdom. There's lots of names for it, but it's in all of us. And that's what we can be grateful for, and that's what we can count on. Any other questions or comments? Marie, did that answer your question?
Could I answer that a little bit as well?
Sure, please.
Go on, Marie. Did you want to say something back to Joe?
Yes, thank you. Go on.
It was beautiful what Joe said. And what occurred to me is two things. Is one is that, see, in Joe's story there, he couldn't have known in advance that was the answer. He couldn't have prepared now for that moment, because thought happens in the moment. Fresh thought comes in the moment. And what I was hearing him saying then was that because he knows that and he relies on that, almost even without even spelling that out, in the moment, that's what occurred to him. That's what he heard, right? And we'd all have a different experience of that. So you couldn't say right now, this is the advice to give to somebody, because they'll get wisdom or advice or a guidance in the moment. So that's what I heard from Joe. And the other angle of that is for us who watching other people suffer and worrying about other people. What's been really helpful for me is that knowing that they have this too, and they might not know it, but we all have this spiritual innate resilience, wisdom, whatever you want to call it. We all human beings have it. And so if you are with someone else who's suffering, and you want to help them so much, sometimes the best help you can give is by knowing that that's true, and acting and speaking to that rather than the fear and the suffering. Because there's a saying, speak to the health and the health speaks back. And I've really seen that to be true. So when you hold the space for someone, knowing that it's possible for them to have a thought, a fresh thought in the moment that will pop them out of where they are, you speak to that inner resilience rather than the symptoms of what's occurring. You can be compassionate in that moment, but if you're speaking to that deeper place, the deeper place can hear you and it can speak back. It's a great question.
The difference between sympathy and compassion. Sympathy, you kind of commiserate with the person. You go down with them. With compassion, your heart goes out, but you don't go into their pain with them. You see something that's beyond their pain. That is their resilience. So compassion, for first responders, for nurses, for counselors, people who do what we do, is extremely important, because you can get burned out very easily if you live in the feeling of all of your patients. But when you feel compassion, it protects you from their negativity or their pain. So this is a good thing, whether you're a parent or a nurse or counselor or a minister or a doctor, first responder, whatever your role is. Your compassion is a built-in immune system protector.
Judy was waving. Judy Gretty.
Judy? Peter, can you unmute? Is Judy?
She looks like she's doing her ironing now.
Oh, okay.
And
Judy, did you have a question or a comment? Peter, could you unmute her?
Sorry, I'm trying to find her.
Oh, okay. Judy, there she is. I can see her.
Oh,
She's
I
just
see.
right
Okay.
there.
All right, there we go.
oh,
I'm sure we have different things showing up on our screens.
I don't really, excuse me, I don't really have a question, but I felt like I needed to connect. I was introduced to the principles 20 years ago, and I did a program with Joe and Mavis in Minneapolis. I live in Massachusetts. And actually there's someone else on this webinar that I taught with, and she and I have been talking, and what's happened is, life got in the way, put it that way. Life got in the way, and I've kind of, especially over the last several years, I've never forgotten that about thought. But I have, and I know that I'm the thinker, and I do believe that we have this resilience inside, and we have a connection to something much bigger than ourselves. But you kind of have forgotten that. As I've heard all of you say, every human being suffers. We all have unbelievable experiences sometimes, and I have had more than my share. And I'm not going to go into self-pity, but I think when all of this has happened, my fear got, it was such panic. And I'm blanking is what I'm doing, but I just needed to. Carolyn sent me the link to you today, and so I got right on. But yeah, I'm really scared. My husband passed away 3 years ago, and I am living right now. My son and my grandson are living with me, so I'm not alone. We used to be in a home. We're not now. We're in an apartment. I lived on the vineyard for a whole life, and we've been here for almost 3 years. But it's just a lot, and it's just I've been hunkering down for it's my third week. And before that, I had broke my kneecap. So I had already been inside for a couple of months. So it's just trying to just sort through it, settle down. I've been telling myself what I was doing, Joe, was the real old thing of when I got scared, I would try to fight it. And what I'm doing now is I'm attempting to say, yes, I am anxious. And Joe, when you were talking about when you grew up, about the fear piece, when I started with health realization, I realized how many disaster thoughts I had. I never even was aware that I had any. And of course, what's been happening now is all these disaster thoughts. I'm just so fearful that something's going to happen to, people I care about, or myself, I guess. But it's just a fear. I know it's a fear, but it's been paralyzing. And I actually started taking some L-tryptophan for the last couple nights, which is an amino acid. It's natural, and it's really helped me the last couple nights sleep better. It's just that I'm an extrovert, and I have loved connecting with people, and I just have kind of lost my way. That's all. And I know I'm capable of getting back, because I have so many times, you were talking about, with your depression. And it's just remembering having faith in all that you say, because I know it's true. I know what you're saying is true. I have it's not about true or not true. It's just, I know that what you're saying makes perfect sense. But for me to say I'm lost is are you kidding me? Having to be in control of everything? No, to admit that is that I don't have all the answers is a real huge thing for me, I guess. I don't know if it makes any sense.
Well, if I can just say, I think what you have just done by acknowledging this and admitting it and asking for acknowledgement and just sharing it with all of us, and even getting on this webinar today, you've already triggered the resilience response. It's kind of done in a way. Once you say uncle, once you kind of admit, I don't know Jack anymore. And I also want to say to you, Judy, that I've felt that same way regularly, and especially lately. I thought, who am I to write another book about Fearproof Your Life? Or, if they could see me now, they wouldn't listen to a word I'm saying, So Jacqueline and I are, those of us that teach this, we're just as human as anybody else, and we go in and out of it and get caught up in our thinking. And there's this little part of, I should know better than this. And then that becomes a club to beat yourself with. And then you realize, that's not making me feel any better. And so, hey, we're human beings having a human experience. And, but what you do know, and what you learned long ago through Mavis and I, or in that time when you reached out for help years ago, you've got the seeds of understanding that just need a little watering. And what you just did, sometimes tears are good, very nutritious miracle grow for resilience. You know, just admitting that you're licked in a way, admitting that you've lost it, it takes a lot of pressure away, and it opens your arm to receive a hug from the world. You're in a receptive state of hugginess. So I don't know about the rest of you, but when you were so vulnerable a minute ago, Judy, I wanted to reach out and give you an air hug. I won't give you a personal physical hug because it's against the regulations at this point. And we're on a Zoom, so it's cool. But that drew up my compassion. I bet I'm not alone. Other people feel that? Yeah. Put your thumbs up if you agree. So there's something about trying to be a strong trooper and, you know, put on a good front that has the opposite effect. Someone sending a hug to Judy. Sending you a hug to Judy.
Yeah.
Gina Popejoy. There's hugs coming in from all over the world.
I really appreciate what you shared, Judy. The feeling of it as well is very beautiful and very helpful to other people, because lots of people are experiencing what you experience but are afraid to talk about it or say. But what I really, really wanted to acknowledge is your wisdom, because this is what came to mind. You know, like, have you ever been a driver, like driven a car? Right.
Sure.
Okay. So, you know, when you drive in a car and you're going somewhere and you don't know where you're going and you get lost and you just keep driving around and you get more and more frustrated and more annoyed with yourself, and you just get more narrow with your thinking because you should know where it is, and you're ignoring, like I've done this. I've ignored the sat nav. I remember once I was going around this big massive roundabout in London, and the sat nav kept saying, take the next turning on your right, and then I'd take the turning, and then eventually the sat nav, it felt like the sat nav said, take the next turning on your right. Like, it felt like she got frustrated with me. She can't have done right, but it felt like that. And I'd missed this little tiny right. I'd missed this little tiny right turn. I hadn't even seen it on the other 4 times, you know, on this 5th time, and she got snappy with me. I saw it. But the thing is that when you're in that situation, the time when you get relief is when you say, I'm lost. And that's the thing, because before then you think you've got it, you think you're handling it, and you're just working with what you've got already. The minute that you say, I'm lost, you get new information, you get a broader picture. So saying you're lost is such a wise thing. And in the same way that your resilience response is triggered, as Joe said, you've got a wider picture, because you've said, I'm lost. And you know what? Everyone gets lost all the time. Not as much as me, but you know, often. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. Yeah. Thank you.
You know, the thing is, we glide over the wisdom part, because it's the wisdom part is I'm lost, right? But we go, oh yeah, and then, you know, and I'm this, and I'm a control person, and this and that, and we don't notice the wisdom part because it's just small and quiet.
Right.
But that's the thing to look. Yeah, that's the thing to look at. That's the thing to go, oh yeah, look. Yeah, I've just admitted I'm lost. That's cool.
That's a lot. That's a lot for me.
Yeah, I know. But when you acknowledge that part, That's the part that can help you, not the rest of the judgment.
And you've created a ripple effect here, Judy, because on the chats people are sending in, you're getting people recognizing where you are and sending you hugs and way to go, and I'm lost too, and we're all in this together. You know, it's just it gives permission to other people to admit where they're at. And in the admitting, it's that, you know, like in the 12-step programs, the first one is, you know, admitted I think the original Oxford movement was, we admitted we were licked. In AA, it's we admitted we were powerless over. And there's something about that admission that allows humility, openness, and acceptance. That's the beginning of the healing process that came through that wisdom at that point in time. And I think that it's built into all of us, and all we as three principles teachers are doing is pointing people to how this thing is perfectly designed, this mind. Our mind is perfectly designed to be resilient, to bounce back, to heal. And it doesn't matter how damn big the pandemic gets. Resilience will still be there. It doesn't matter how many people die. It doesn't matter if some of us die. Any of us could die. Resilience will continue. We will continue. We will get to the other side of this. We will survive this and learn some really valuable lessons from all of this. This is really kind of what the doctor ordered in kind of a metaphysical sense. And I could go on about that, but I'm not going to at this point yet.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Evan and Krista. Is Peter unmuting?
Go ahead, Evan.
I'm not called Evan.
Oh, it's not Evan.
It's just that I'm borrowing somebody's computer, and he was called Evan. So I'm called Jean. Hi. Don't really know where to start, but I think that I've got something that might be quite relevant at last to what people are going through at the moment. So I did a long stretch of isolation, and I didn't do it in prison. I did it in a kind of prison because I was a bit like Joe, and I had Lyme's disease, and I became allergic to everything. Like, I became allergic to things that I ate, but I became allergic to dust and mold and electromagnetic field and cars and telephones and everything. And then I couldn't live in a house because my sensitivities were so bad. I couldn't live in a house in the UK. My name is Jean, and I'm from Edinburgh, by the way, which is very wet and damp. And my immune system just basically took a walk, and I thought I was going to die, and I thought I was going to die every day for like 5 years. I had to live in a dark room for 3 years, but then I had to be removed from everybody that I loved. I had to go to a warmer country. I moved to France because I couldn't live inside, so I was basically living outside. And then I found out that the guy who was my boyfriend, who I'd met at a Buddhist monastery, at the same time turned out to be a heroin addict at the same time that this was happening. And I'm laughing. And I'm actually laughing because I'm through so much of that. And at the time, the worst thing was that, so it's weird that the whole world is doing what I did a few years ago. And I was almost looking forward to this. not the world going through it, but looking forward to being able to do isolation in a dignified way. Because I didn't do it in a dignified way before, and I did it in a way where for 3 years I prayed to die. And the reason I'm saying this is that even when you want to die, you don't die, but there's something in you that wants to just like keep going. And I was like trying to bat it down all the time, and like, I can't take any more of this drama and this. It was a terror because I couldn't see. I'm a twin. I couldn't see my twin sister. I couldn't see any of my family. And living in a foreign country with a guy that takes heroin. And also, after all that, I became allergic to what we're doing now, which is Zooming and telephoning people. So I couldn't even communicate that way without getting violently ill. I would be sick after I'd been on a computer or a telephone. And I just thought, that's it. There's no way through this. Then my boyfriend ran off with someone. This is a long time ago, and I was left in the south of France for 3 months on my own in a house, couldn't get out, couldn't get home. And then I just started to listen, and things began to, answers started to come. And I think the thing was, I wanted all the answers in a great big box at the front door that I could just dive into and be better and walk out of it. Because I'm thinking, I've done like 15 years of this sickness. You know, time's got to be, it's got to sort itself out now. And all the things that had kept coming to me that I'd tried, like EFT or little things, like small nutritional things that just made me really sick. And so I threw them all out of the door. I just threw the lot of them and thought, well, that particular person who did that for me in that way, that process didn't work, so none of that field will work. Or this bit of medicine made me so ill before, so it's never going to work again. Or going for a walk around the block just to come down is not going to work. Nothing is going to work. And what I found was that when I'd run out of everything that was going to work, like everything, I just started to examine every possibility again as a means of getting out of it. So I although I said no to everything, I started saying yes to everything. And I say that people saved my life. Obviously, I saved my own life. There were a few people that intervened that really began to move me forward and forward and forward. So what I'm saying is that even after all those years of isolation, and I never thought I would see a family member again, I thought that people would die while I was away from them. I thought that all these terrible things, actually none of them happened. When I got back home to the UK, I got back seeing my family, I got past being allergic to electromagnetic field and past being unable to talk on the phone and past a lot of things. I'm not past everything. But what I learned is to just allow the possibilities without the mind jumping in and saying, right, there's no way there's no way. Just like that black and white thinking that this is a disaster, this is a catastrophe. The world, I'm also a journalist, and I'll just tell you this before I shut up. I've interviewed people as a journalist, I've interviewed people that have brain tumors, and a woman that had HIV, and she got it from a haemophiliac partner who didn't tell her for 5 years that he was HIV positive. She got HIV and she thought she was going to die. This is like 15 years ago. And she just thought that was it. Her husband eventually died. The consultant said, there's not much hope for you and you'll never have children. Just recently, I've interviewed her. She wants me to write a book about her. She's on her third child, no HIV at all. She's married, and she's living a relatively symptom-free life, because now, in that space of time that was so disastrous and catastrophic, they found a solution to HIV. now that you can be given antiretrovirals so that the person that you go out with is unlikely to catch HIV. So maybe, you know, there always, to me, is an answer. There always is an answer. But for many years, there never was an answer. And there never will be an answer unless you say, well, there is an answer. It's somewhere in there. And you might not be able to see it, but yeah. Right, I'll shut up. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean.
It was amazing. Krista wanted to say something.
Hi there. Thanks, everybody. There's two things kind of coming up for me right now. One is trust deeper, and the other is that I'm lost. I work in healthcare, so I'm not isolating. I'm going into the hospital and the clinic pretty frequently. One of you brought up, you know, how do I deal with being intubated? And I will say, as someone who works in healthcare, I'm not afraid of patients being intubated. But where I think we as healthcare providers are getting lost is that one of the tools of our trade is presence. And when someone is suffering, we want to be near them. And that is being limited right now because we don't have the proper protective equipment to protect us. And I'm not afraid of being present when I'm all in my gear and in a spacesuit, because I know how powerful that is to be in that human to human relationship. So that I'm lost is such a perfect expression of what I think a lot of us are feeling. How can I be present? And then the other issue that makes me feel lost is I could be a vector of this virus. Usually, as someone who is working with people and patients, I'm not afraid of hurting my patients. But this virus is showing us that when healthcare providers are not protected, we get the virus ourselves and then we give it to our patients. I feel so lost. What are the tools? So I love that. I love that because it really, it's not about me, but it's like a whole new environment that my body is put into. I'm not used to these realities of I can't be present without creating more risk. So yeah, I need to trust deeper. I have no idea what that looks like. And really just sitting in that lost feeling and admitting we're lost. The other piece that is sort of happening with healthcare right now is some denial. There's a lot of this won't happen to us. It's not going to be that bad. We're young and healthy. But if I believe what is happening in other countries, that's not true. We can't deny what's been happening. Anyway, this isn't very insightful, but my lens on this is a little bit different, just in where my body has to go from day to day. I appreciate all of you.
Well, we really appreciate you, and thank you so much for your service and what you're doing. You guys, you're on the front lines there, and you know, I can't say I envy you because all the things that you just said, but there's something about admitting the truth. You lost, admitting the truth of it, that takes the blinders off, so that you can see other things that you can't see when you're trying not to trying to pretend you're not lost. And so, but yeah, I mean, we're all kind of at the edge of our understanding of this. We've never, you don't get a drill for this. You don't get you don't learn about it in nursing school or medical school, or how to deal with this when you don't have enough PPEs, and you don't have enough masks, and you don't have enough equipment and ventilators and all of that. And so when we can speak the truth, acknowledge it, but we can speak it from a centeredness, a grounding. There's a power behind that. There's a power of truth behind that. When we get insecure, the truth comes out as anger, or it comes out as blame or judgment, or it comes out in ways that is less helpful. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean it's not okay to feel any of those things. Yes, we're human. We're going to have those feelings, because we're not prepared like we could have been, like we should have been. But it is what it is, and we do the best we can by acknowledging our humanity as we go through this, reaching out, and like you just being here today, Krista, look at what you're doing for yourself just to be here. It's feeding your soul, it's feeding your spirit. And so you fed our spirit when you shared what you shared. You were very, very powerful and impactful by just acknowledging the truth. So that there's something about the honesty and the truthfulness, combined with the understanding of where your experience is coming from, that allows movement. So, it's like I work a lot with people in addictions, with heroin addiction, alcoholism, etc. And the biggest hurdle for people is to admit they have a problem. Mm-hmm. The ego, I can control it. I don't need help. But there's something about admitting you need help, asking for help, reaching out, being vulnerable, that starts the healing process. So what you're doing, and it's so cute, you got your little mask on while you're talking to us.
I wear it in my house, I don't want to share it with my family, and that's the new reality.
That's a cute mask, by the way. I love your
mask. Thank you. Joe, I don't expect you to remember me, but I'm a 1988 graduate of the Minneapolis Institute of Mental Health.
Oh, really?
I spent a year with Mavis, and I appreciate everything that you and Mavis have shared with me.
Oh, great. So do you live here in the Twin Cities?
I live in River Falls. I'm probably 15 miles away from you as the crow flies.
Yeah, my granddaughter's at River Falls College. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
May I just speak to something, Krista, that you said? I mean, same as Joe, I truly acknowledge you and what you're doing, and I felt a lot in your saying that you trust deeper. That will serve you, and that there's nothing for me to say beyond that. But the part that I wanted to speak to was the being present with the patients. I want you to consider not underestimating your intention and how far the intention of presence goes. We have a similar thing in our group, in the Beyond group, in that we write letters to our guys that we can't see, the vulnerable people in prison, and we just write about our lives, and we're not going in and we're not running groups and we're not doing all those things that we normally do, and I get to see them once a week, and I listen, and I take as many precautions that I can take during that one visit. And it's very easy for me to get into my head about what's a few minutes, 2 kilometers, 2 meters apart from somebody going to do for them. And I can tell you that the intention that comes with that and the love that comes with that, not just for me, you know, I'm merely a channel of all the people that are thinking about those guys. The intention and the love and the caring and the compassion that comes with that reaches them, whether, no matter how much distance we have. And I don't deny the power that presence has, but there's presence beyond the physical, and you're bringing that still.
Yeah, we think of love as a physical thing in a way, you know, like you have to touch someone or hug someone or hold them, and I love hugging and touching anybody who knows me. I miss doing that as much as I can normally do. But I love what you said, Jacqueline, about intention. So intention is as tangible as a physical hug. And on a quantum field level, if you want to look at it from physics, that intention of love can be felt across the planet. I know healers working with people from the other side of the world who heal the physical body without being anywhere near them, just through the mind, just through the power of mind. So if it can heal someone from across the planet, you can give someone a hug with your mind from 5 feet away or 6 feet away, whatever is the safe distance. It does something for people. You don't want to minimize that, the intention of a note, the intention of a phone call, the intention of a text, the intention, and it is the intention behind it that's more powerful than the words. It's the intention, is on a physical level, the quantum energetic level, there's a feeling that gets transmitted. And I don't want to get too esoteric here, but that I believe that, I know that that's absolutely true. When I'm sitting around thinking about my sister and the phone rings and it's my sister, I know, okay, there's another kind of communication going on here other than the phone line or the satellite line. I'm dating myself with the phone line. So I don't know, we're all connected, literally. We're all connected. And even though we are isolated, even though we're all on Zoom now, we were going to be having a conference. Jacqueline was flying to Minnesota in a couple of weeks, and or a month or so, and we were going to have this big conference. And in lieu of that, we're doing these webinars. So we're still doing it. We're just not doing it in person, but we will next fall. We hope. That's the intention.
Joe, I mean, I know that you haven't heard of this letter, but this letter speaks to what Krista was talking to just.
Yeah.
If that would be okay with people, I might skip over anything that shouldn't be read out, but I'll. But just to give you some context, well, Krista and everybody, this is a young guy who we worked with in prison, and we stopped groups a month ago, I think. And I think he had 6 groups with us, and in the 6th group he opened up. So before then he didn't tell us anything, and he's only 26, and he's got 4 kids, and he hadn't spoken with his children for months, and he'd also broken his hand last time we saw him. So as I said, the people, you know, around me had all written letters and so on, and one of them wrote a letter to this young man. So I have to give him a name because he names himself in here, so I'll call him T. So he says, "Thank you so much for writing. It really lifted my mood. The world is going bonkers with this virus. My thoughts of self-harm are reducing. I really don't want to lose my life in prison. The group has been amazing. It says some personal things to the person who wrote. In this crisis, it seems like we need the loved ones around us for support. Well, I'm still working on my thought process. It's a forever thing. Guess what? I made that phone call this morning. So he hadn't phoned his family for months because he was afraid of what his partner would say to him, that she would swear at him and not let him speak to the children. I made that phone call this morning after Jacqueline delivered the letters. It wasn't how I expected. She answered and she was quiet, and even I paused for a second. But after I said hello, she said, "What the F do you want?" I managed to talk about a few things. The kids are safe and doing well. And we came to the decision that it would be better if I maintain contact with her to show that I can be consistent before we introduce contact with the kids again. It makes sense because my mental health and emotional instability could be detrimental to the children's well-being. I've experienced that firsthand with my dad's mental health. But watch this space. I'm so much happier now that I made the call, and I can't wait until tomorrow so I can hear what they've been doing around the house. I've turned a corner today, and I'm proud of myself for manning up and making the right decision. Every day I woke up, I felt I had no purpose, having thoughts of taking my own life every day. The coronavirus came around and I thought it was a load of bleep that would blow over. It's actually opened my eyes to the devastation that death causes, and now I really value my life and want to make the most of every day. If one call can snap me out of the negative thoughts, then one call can save a life. I really wish I could be with my friends in this time, but that's not possible. So I have to do everything I can to stay safe. We're not so different. In fact, all of us are closer than we could ever have imagined. From different backgrounds, different ways of life, good and bad choices. We are all so beautiful inside and out. Over the past 10 months, I've never felt so alone, without identity and broken. But that was just me being stuck in thoughts and reflecting into them how I felt. I'm so glad I attended the group, as now I know for sure that it's not just me who has them sorts of thoughts. It's not just others in the same situation either. W was amazing too. As everybody probably noticed, I'm a very personal person. I intend not to show my emotions in constructive ways. I'm like a closed book. But when W spoke about his story and how he felt suicidal most days, it shocked me to hear from him. I'd already made an opinion of him. I thought he was doing some small sentence for fraud or something. And although we seem worlds apart, I can relate to how he feels. And that prompted me telling the whole group how I'd been feeling, even though it hurt me so much to tell everyone that I hadn't spoken to my kids and that I have suicidal thoughts most days. It needed to come out. And yeah, it may have shocked people, as that's not how I carry myself around the jail or on the wings. I always tried to be the big, strong T that my father wanted of me. But I'm not weak, for in fact it's made me stronger, less insecure. So watch this space. We're all in it together, and I really hope to see you all again. I'm out in 14 months, and trust me, I will stay in contact with the Beyond family. I want to know more. I feel stronger than ever. I went to hospital last week thinking it was for my hand, and I ended up at the dentist for a post-op, and I still haven't had my hand seen. It's in a really bad way. I've put complaints about it, but they're prison complaints, as healthcare have done their bit. And the NHS are already under huge pressure. So I feel bad to go down there and moan. And they assure me that they've advised the prison to take me for an X-ray. My bone is quite clearly out of place and it's causing me a lot of pain. I miss the group, but the main thing is staying safe. I leave the news on all day, and I've been trying to get hold of a novel by Dean Koontz, The Eyes of Darkness. I really want to read that book, but our library has closed for a while due to the virus. It talks about writing back. It'd be nice to hear how you all are. Please say hello to everyone for me. Thanks again for writing. Stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives. I believe this group has saved mine. Take care, T.
Beautiful.
And he's a man who is in lockdown 23 hours a day. They're allowed out of their cells for 1 hour to eat and wash and get some fresh air. And he's in his little tiny cell for 23 hours and he's writing a letter like that.
Wow. Well, that's a beautiful way to end our conversation today, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is really beautiful. I don't really have any closing thoughts other than just remember how resilient you are. Don't believe everything you think. And we have nothing to fear but fear itself. But love to all of you. And, Peter recorded this. So if you want to listen to it again or share it with other people, Peter, how will that be available? It'll be up on the Three Principles Addictions Conference website or mine, or
Yeah, we'll make sure it gets to many different places and everyone knows where to find the link. And we have 2 more webinars as part of this free series, which I'm very excited about. Next week, Barbara and Christian. Wave your hands, Barbara. I thought I saw Christian, but
both there. Yeah.
Oh, the Barbara Smith. Barbara and Christian will be speaking, and then the final webinar will be with Amy Johnson.
Hope you all can make all of them, and thanks for all of what you shared today. And Jacqueline, it was so great to teach with you today. Thank you so much, dear, for
You too.
what you're doing and all the great work you're doing in the prisons.
You too. Thank you, everybody. Big
Thank
hugs.
you. That was beautiful. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.